Ho-hum. Okay, we're joined by Alpesh Patel of Prifinium Partners to talk us through the papers. I suppose there are still a lot of questions, aren't there, as to the exact nature of Colonel Gaddafi's demise, and this might be important in terms of the way we assess forthcoming events in Libya.
Well, the issues about whether or not he was killed illegally have been raised by one or two people. That's going to pass. It's not really going to matter after a while. I think most people are going to focus on the fact that he's gone. What the International Herald Tribune does, of course an American paper, is make the point that this was military action not led by the Americans for once, but actually, rather unusually, led by the French, albeit with the British. So if you do want to have regime change and you don't want it to take years and cost billions, because in the case of us Europeans we can't afford those billions, then you get the French to go in, albeit with NATO forces and Britain leading the way as well, and you get it in a few weeks. And there's something you wouldn't have thought you would have read. That's the way the American papers have played it.
It presents the Europeans, doesn't it, President Sarkozy and David Cameron, with a triumph, doesn't it, for their military intervention in Libya?
Most certainly, and for President Sarkozy, what a wonderful thing for him, given that they've got presidential elections next year. But not just that, Le Figaro, which, great headline, Gaddafi, la fin. That's it. Very plain and simple, very pro-Sarkozy, of course, saying what a wonderful job he did leading the French forces and so on and so forth. But it's a boost for the French president, and I bet he's wishing that the French presidential elections were tomorrow, because you want to always have an election after a military victory.
It's been a good week, actually, hasn't it? He also had a baby girl earlier in the week. Good week for Sarko.
Yeah, not too bad at all. You know, gotta, you know, let's get the important things though. France had a military victory.
Yes. Of course, just as well it happened when it did, because he wouldn't be able to afford it very soon, would he?
Well, yes, I suspect you're talking not just about his personal finances, because it's child number 4, but about his national finances, because there's quite a few stories about the debt crisis. So luckily he doesn't have to bail out Greece personally. But actually, I should say, before we get on to that one, China Daily, different angle, very matter of fact. The issue is the Chinese, of course, weren't behind this, neither were the Russians regarding Libya. So where do the contracts go? You know, after the war, the spoils. And, you know, the National Transition Council hasn't necessarily been very pro-British or pro-French, saying when it comes to reconstruction, our brothers in arms, the French and the British who helped us with this, and the other NATO countries.
I think the Italians have got in rather nicely, though, haven't they?
Well, of course.
They had a history of
long
production in Libya, of course.
Absolutely, they've got a long political relationship with them, with the Libyans, and of course partly because of geography, but also politically. But I don't think it's going to harm the Chinese or the Russians. They're going to probably think, well, you know, we didn't get involved militarily or politically with this for their own internal reasons. They don't want to be seen helping revolutionists when it comes to democratic overhaul, certainly in the case of China. But from a business perspective, Chinese have got money, and if it's Chinese money which is going to help with reconstruction, so be it. I don't think we should poo-poo that at all. I think it'll be good, because that's needed in a country like Libya, and it's needed pretty quickly. So I think the Chinese will be quite happy the way things have turned out, and I think it'll be good for North Africa, for the Arab Spring, and for Western Europe that the Chinese come in.
The prospect of increased oil production is a rare piece of good news for the financial markets, of course.
Yes, and that should hopefully be good news for everything from the price of oil down to the cost of petrol in the pump. However, I suspect it'll be short-lived, because we still don't know who's in charge and when production will dramatically increase and what the right level should be.
Of how much they are capable of producing. I mean, it's not a drastic amount, is it, in terms of the global economy?
No, but having said that, you don't necessarily need a drastic amount when it comes to expectations and oil prices. And they are, on the flip side, they're members of OPEC, and that is a cartel, and as a cartel they'll make sure that they're not going to flood the market with oil and try and depress the relatively high prices we've got. So I'd say in terms of expectations, good. In terms of commodity prices, good, but it's going to be short-lived, and it's not really going to affect the inflation that we're feeling in our pockets around the world, and levels of consumption will continue roaring. But yes, better now than it was in economic as well as political terms, of course.
About 2% of world oil production comes out of Libya, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on to a rather touching photograph. I think it's very touching, between Sarkozy. One wonders what they might have to say to each other that could elicit a smile these days. But no, that is not Angela Merkel's smile.
Well, no, it's exactly
I was hoping actually to think, although probably it is nowadays. But
you should see her when she's frowning. That is her smile.
Let's have a
She's
look at
got a
what
lot to frown
on
about right
Sarkozy,
now,
the Telegraph. The Telegraph.
She's sending a message. She's trying her best. She's sending a message. That's saying it all. She's saying, look, I'm trying my best, but I'm not getting what I want.
When the French and the Germans really experience discord over this issue, you know you're in trouble. This is a summit coming up this weekend, and there doesn't seem to be a great deal of agreement between these two countries when really they need to set the agenda for the G20 meeting at the beginning of November.
Look, there's two important ramifications to this. First of all, turmoil in the markets, of course, when we've got this level of uncertainty because they can't agree, and we go back whatever, 3 steps and forward 4 or whatever it is, because of the lack of certainty. But the second part of this is, can you believe it? You've got the Americans lecturing the Europeans on political deadlock. You know, how soon they forget. They lost an A star as a result of, because of their downgrading, because of their deadlock between the President and Congress. But now they're now saying to the Europeans, get your house in order. Because, of course, the American house, when it comes to debt, is so much better and so much more in order. And I think the French and the Germans will get round to resolving this issue because, fundamentally and politically, they are so committed to the EU and the, well, if you can still call it an experiment after so many years, but the EU experiment. So that will get resolved. But the problem is, Greece's debt will be 181% of GDP. We just need to cut to the chase and say, look, they obviously can't afford to keep paying the interest payments. If you think of it in terms of credit card payments, we need to cut how much they pay, so write off part of it and extend for how long they will be paying the rest in smaller instalments.
Explain, if you can, in simple terms, what the basic disagreement is right now between Sarkozy and Merkel.
It revolves around 2 things. First of all, how much money is needed exactly for bailing out, and secondly, who's going to be contributing to that. So as you can imagine, it's about the things you would expect when it comes to debt bailouts, is how much and who's going to pay for it. First of all, they can't quite work out how much is needed, because it's not just about the Greeks not even knowing how much they might need, but also, depending on how you do this, the ramifications for the French banks, the German banks, and everybody else, if you do take a haircut, you do write off debt, depending on which route you go down, makes a difference to, first of all, how much of your national interest is damaged by how much the French have to put money in their hands in their pockets, and as we know, Mr. Sarkozy is going to need all the money he can get, but also it's going to make a difference in terms to your own national bank. So obviously what they're trying to do is say, well, look, we want to try and put less in, but we know that more is needed, and then it's normal negotiations.
There is an additional nuance. Martin keeps showing me that picture of Angela Merkel just off camera to make me laugh. There is an additional nuance, which is that French banks, it is widely accepted, need more propping up. And the question of who's going to pay for that is a source of discord too.
You know, this thing about banks needing propping up, it's a bit of a red herring for the simple reason that if you ask just about any serious accountant, they'll tell you that banks' balance sheets have been de facto bankrupt for decades. It's absolutely false and fake to say that they need more money. They've needed more money for ages. As long as we can work on the fiction that they can make their payments as they need to week by week, then this idea that they need a war chest, the war chest is far greater than what they've got. It's not just the French banks. Everybody needs the bailout. But as long as we can keep to the fiction and just close our ears and eyes to it, we'll be okay.
Alpesh Patel of Pricinium Partners, thank you very much. And thank you very much indeed for joining us.